Take a slow, deep breath and imagine yourself standing on the banks of the Nile, just as the sky softens into twilight. The water moves slowly, with a sleepy kind of rhythm, as if it too remembers the long memory of centuries. The reeds rustle with the evening breeze, and the air smells faintly of earth grain, in the last heat of the day as it slips behind the western horizon. Across the water, silhouettes of palm trees and mud brick houses blend into the gathering dusk. In the distance, a herd of cattle is being led home. Voices rise and fall in the distance, not hurried, ever. Hurried here, but rhythmic, steady, and familiar. This is Egypt, not the Egypt of pharaohs in gold, not the Egypt of tombs or towering monuments, but something quieter, older, and more enduring. The Egypt of daily life, of tilled fields, of sandals worn smooth with walking, of families huddled under red mats, whispering to the stars. Tonight, we will journey gently through that world, not through battles or betrayals, but through the calm, patient hum of ordinary existence beneath the pharaoh's gaze. What did it mean to live here, to labor beneath the sun, to sleep beside the Nile, to grow old in the shadow of stone? What was it really like to be one of the millions whose names are not written on monuments, but whose hands shaped the world we still speak of in awe? We begin, as always, with you. You, a worker, a villager, a voice not written down but never truly forgotten. So let the modern world drift away. Close your eyes if you wish. Let your breathing fall into that ancient rhythm slow. Even like the lapping of the river, and we will begin. Segment 1. Why you wouldn't last a day as an ancient Egyptian worker. The sun has not yet risen, but you are already awake. You lie on a simple mat of woven reeds in a room without windows, where the night's coolness is fleeting and precious. Your bones are sore before the day begins. The faint scent of yesterday's sweat still lingers on your tunic, and outside, the village begins to murmur to life chickens stirring, children whining, pots clinking against stone. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake your younger brother curled beside you. He will join you at the worksite today. It is his first day hauling bricks, and he is still excited. You envy his optimism. Even as you brace your feet against the packed dirt floor and rise to stretch muscles that never truly rest, your mother hands you a piece of barley bread, still warm from the communal oven, and a small onion. It is enough to keep you from fainting under the sun, but not enough to fill you. You step outside as the sky begins to blush with the first hints of light. The village is little more than a scattering of low mud brick homes, flat-roofed and huddled together for shade. The walls are cracked from heat, patched with straw and dung. Flies already hum at your ears. A donkey brays. Someone nearby curses softly. The same beginning every day. The overseer arrives before the sun crests the horizon. His voice is sharp, his stick sharper. You join the column of men and boys making your way toward the work site today. It is farther from the river, where new foundations are being laid. The project will take months, maybe longer. You do not ask what the final structure will be. It's not your place to know. You build what you are told to build. By the time the sun is above the horizon, you are covered in dust. The first task is brick hauling. The bricks made of Nile mud and straw are heavy, especially once they bake in the sun. Carry them in baskets slung across your shoulders. The straps dig deep into your skin, leaving hot red welts. Your hands blister, then harden, then blister again. No one complains. There is no point. The heat grows thick, suffocating. You are allowed water lukewarm, often cloudy, but you ration it. If you drink too much too soon, the afternoon becomes unbearable. The sun climbs higher, relentless. Sweat stings your eyes. You can feel the salt crust forming on your skin. There's no shade here, only brief moments behind half-built walls or under the meager shadow of scaffolding. Midday brings a pause, not rest, exactly, but a slowing. You chew another chunk of bread, drink water, and stretch your legs. You talk quietly with your brother. He is quiet now, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. You show him how to wrap cloth around his shoulders to cushion the load, how to breathe slowly and evenly to preserve strength. No one taught you these things. You learned them by failing. The afternoon brings more hauling than plastering. Your arms ache with every movement. You spread a slurry of mud and lime across the fresh bricks, smoothing it with your fingers. The mix burns a little, but your skin is tough now. You've worked through worse. You've worked through fever, through toothaches, through injury. There is no sick leave. If you do not work, you do not eat. By late afternoon, the light turns golden, then copper. The work slows, not because it's finished, but because you cannot see well enough to continue. The overseer counts the loads, checks the wall height, mutters to his assistant. You wash your hands in a basin that smells faintly of blood and dust. Your knuckles are split. Your back throbs. You walk home slowly, your feet dragging through the sand. Your brother stumbles, and you catch him by the elbow. Neither of you speaks. The village comes into view, its roofs outlined against the soft orange sky. Smoke from cooking fires rises lazily. A dog barks once. Children chase each other between doorways. You pass your neighbors, some nod, others simply blink with exhaustion. Dinner is lentils, thin and watery. Your father, too old to work now, sits near the door, telling a story about a crocodile spirit that once lived in the canal. You listen without hearing, your body already half asleep. You eat in silence, curl onto your mat, and stare at the ceiling, where the dried reeds crackle quietly with the night wind. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and again. You are not a slave. You are not free. You are part of something larger, older, and different. You live not for glory, but for continuity. Somehow, that is enough. Because life is the rhythm of the river, and Eutyste sore and silent are its pulse. Segment 2. The life of a scribe. Ink, silence, and power without a sword. Imagine now that you are not waking beneath a roof of reed and clay, but within a modest chamber tucked inside the outer courtyard of a temple or government complex, where the morning is quieter, the air cooler, and your hands miraculously are clean. The village noises are distant. Instead, you hear the rustle of linen robes, the slow brush of sandals against smooth stone, the scrape of a stylus against a wooden tablet. You are a scribe, not a priest, not a nobleman, not a laborer, but something in between. You do not own lands. You do not swing a hammer. But your words, your careful, slow words, shape the world around you. To be a scribe in ancient Egypt is not to wield raw power, but to control what is remembered, what is recorded, what becomes law, what becomes tax, what becomes history. It is a life of precision and restraint, and, at times, immense burden. Your tools are simple: a palette carved from wood or bone, small wells of red and black ink made from soot and ochre, a reed brush chewed gently at the tip to soften it into a fine, whispering nib. You prepare papyrus with care, smoothing it on a hard surface, measuring with your eyes, checking for flaws. You begin your work not with flourish, but with form. Every symbol must be perfect. A bird must look like a bird not only for beauty, but for meaning. One slip of your brush can change a sentence from wisdom to nonsense, from blessing to insult. You sit cross-legged on a mat of woven reeds, your back always just slightly aching from the long hours. There are no chairs, no desks. You adapt your posture to the floor, to the light, to the weather. Your duties change with the season. Some days you copy tax records, calculating sacks of grain and jars of beer owed by each household. Other days you draft letters for the local administrator or compose lists of livestock moved from one nome to another. You might even write him soft lines for a morning chant, to be read aloud as incense curls in quiet sanctuaries. Or perhaps you record births, deaths, marriages, the scaffolding of society. In this world, the pen truly is more lasting than the sword. You are trained in language, yes, but not simply to speak. You must know Old Egyptian, the older forms of Middle Egyptian, and perhaps even foreign tongues, Nubian, Akkadian, or early Greek, depending on the era and location. You must know not just words, but calendars, weights, measurements, proverbs, theology, and the subtleties of honorifics. Writing is not transcription. It is translation of the spoken into the sacred, of the fleeting into the permanent. There is an elegance to the repetition. A line copied 100 times begins to sing, not with boredom, but with rhythm. You know that others will read these symbols long after you are gone. You are, in a sense, extending time. And yet, the life of a scribe is not all serenity. You are often the bearer of bad news. You deliver records of tax shortfalls to farmers already scraping for survival. You tally the hours a laborer has missed, or the bricks he failed to produce. You mark debts. You see in numbers the weight of injustice. You write what you are told. You are not free, not fully. You serve the structure, and the structure endures through your hand. But with this burden comes a kind of status. In a society where most cannot write, your skill is mysterious, almost sacred. You are invited into rooms others never see. The archives, the treasuries, the private quarters of noblemen and priests. You witness decisions being made. You listen, silent, and remember. Sometimes your silence is more powerful than a shout. At festivals, you may sit at the edge of the hall, recording the names of offerings. At funerals, you copy spells onto linen, so that the dead may journey safely. You write with reverence. Every symbol is a key, every sentence a doorway. In private moments, if you are very lucky, you may be permitted to write for yourself. A prayer, a poem, a letter never sent. These scrolls are hidden in niches, under sleeping mats, in sealed jars. Few will ever be read. But the act of writing, of shaping a thought into something permanent, is a kind of peace. Your hands grow calloused, not from plow or blade, but from brush and grip. Your eyes grow tired from squinting in half-light. You learn to sense the day by the angle of shadow across your scroll. You work until your back stiffens, until the ink thickens and cracks, until the words become dust again. And when the day ends, you wash your hands in a basin of cool water, watching the red and black stains swirl and vanish. You walk home slowly, past the temple walls, past the workers packing up their tools, past the river. The breeze is kind. You breathe deeply. Tomorrow, more words will need recording, more numbers, more stories. But, for now, the sky fades into lavender and the first stars blink above. You have not changed the world, but you have preserved it. And in the silence between brushstrokes, that was always enough. Segment 3. Secrets in the stone. The pyramids, the workers, and the silent architects of time. Breathe slowly. Imagine yourself standing before a vast expanse of golden sand just before dawn, with the sky bruised blue at the edges, the near distance, rising like ancient sentinels. Are the pyramids impossibly vast, eternally quiet, their edges still sharp against the early light? They have stood for millennia, unmoved by time, yet shaped entirely by human hands, not by magic, not by alien tools or whispered sorcery, but by the labor of tens of thousands. Tonight, we explore what lies beneath the stone, beneath the grandeur, to uncover the soft human truth buried under centuries of sand and awe. When you first approach the pyramid, its sheer scale stops your breath. It is not just talent is complete. It's not a ruin, not a relic, but a project alive with noise and dust and purpose. You are not a visitor, you are a worker. And this monument is not yet finished. You walk past rows of copper chisels lined neatly on mats. You hear the chink of stone on stone, the low calls of overseers, the scuff of sandals over packed ground. The limestone blocks are stacked like giant puzzle pieces, each one quarried, cut, dragged, and placed by hand. You do not ask how it all comes together. That is for the architects to know. You know your piece, your part. Many imagine this was forced labor slaves whipped into service beneath a tyrant's command. But that story is too simple. In truth, most pyramid workers were not slaves, but skilled laborers and conscripts rotating in from villages across the Nile Valley during the flood season. When fields were underwater and farming paused, for 3 months or 6 you would work. Then you would return to your home, to your cattle, to your family. In this way, the pyramid was not built by prisoners, but by the people stone by stone, season by season, in a rhythm as steady as the Nile itself. You live in a temporary village, a cluster of mud brick homes and communal kitchens near the base of the construction site. Each day begins early. Before the light reaches the pyramid's upper face, you're already hauling sleds of stone, lubricating the sand with water to reduce friction. Teams coordinate the movement with ropes, pulleys, and chants. There is little talking, just breath, sweat, and grit. You find a rhythm, one that runs deep in the blood. Lunch comes with bread and dried fish, onions, sometimes beans or lentils. Beer, thick, nutritious, fermented in clay jars, is always present. It dulls the hunger. It softens the dust in your throat. It's not indulgence, it's sustenance. And the work continues. Stonecutters in the quarry chip at raw limestone with copper tools that dull too quickly, requiring frequent sharpening over hot coals. Scribes pace between teams, noting quotas and injuries. There is a medical hut, not luxurious, but capable. Broken bones are set. Cuts are wrapped with linen and honey. You are not treated as disposable. You are essential. At the top levels, work is quieter, more deliberate. These stones are smaller, but placement matters. Now an error in alignment could ruin the geometry. Surveyors use string and plumb lines. Priests occasionally bless the work with incense or prayer, though not every day. The pyramid is a spiritual monument, yes, but also a technical one, a feat of mathematics and will. At night, the workers return to their barracks, exhausted. There is laughter, sometimes, games with small carved tokens, songs that remember village harvests or tease the overseer, stories told again and again. You listen, eyes closed, body aching. The sky above is wide and black, stars clear, unblinking. The pyramid looms behind you, a shadow in the dark, rising slowly toward its impossible end. It is easy to forget, centuries later, that the pyramid was not built for mystery. It was not a riddle. It was a tomb, a bridge between this life and the next. Every stone was a prayer for eternity. The pharaoh, distant, unknowable, would live forever if the monument endured. And if he lived forever, so too might the land, the people, the world as it was. That was the hope. That was the faith. And so you build not for pay or praise, but because it is what your ancestors did and what your children will remember. You are one among thousands, but you are not forgotten. In later years, your name may be found carved into a block, hidden behind the outer consigna, casual note from one team to another. The friends of Khufu, the drunkards of the ramp. These small graffiti, etched in a moment of boredom or pride, become the only words to reach across time. We now know these names because the stones remembered them. And so we know you too. The pyramid is not just a tomb, it is a monument to organization, to unity, to belief. It is what happens when a civilization pours its energy not into conquest, but into permanence. Every polished face, every hidden chamber, every passageway tells the story of hands calloused, precise, human. And it is those hands, not gold or gods, that still hold our attention. As you rest now, think of the thousands who worked, who built, who passed beneath the sun and shaped the impossible into stone. They were not kings, not heroes, just people. But their work remains. And in that stillness of stone, so do they. Segment 4. The life of the elite. Perfume. Palaces. And the art of never lifting a finger. The morning begins, not with aching joints or barking overseers, but with the soft hush of linen curtains, parting as a servant slips into the room, bearing a bowl of scented water. The air is already warm, but the breeze through the stone lattice keeps it gentle, stirred by the rustling of date palms just outside. You are not a laborer. You are elite perhaps, a minor noble, perhaps an official in service to the pharaoh himself. And in your world, things are done for you. The room is dim and cool, the floor swept clean. Along the walls sit low chests of cedar, inlaid with ivory and filled with garments of the finest linen. You choose one, not the coarsest, but not the best. Today is an administrative day, not ceremonial. Your steward pours water over your hands, fragrant with lotus and a hint of myrrh. A mirror of polished copper is angled to catch the light. You check your coleus, even the men wear it. Not only for beauty, but to ward off the sun's glare and to protect the spirit. You eat lightly. Figs, bread, honeyed beer. Meat is not for the morning. A servant crushes pomegranate in a shallow bowl, offers it with both hands. You eat as scribes wait nearby with tablets, prepared to read reports from estates under your control. There are grain tallies, irrigation complaints, disputes between neighbors who both claim the same ox. You nod slowly, issuing instructions not directly, but through carefully phrased suggestions, Your words are interpreted by those beneath you and relayed in layers. Even your decisions arrive through ritual. Later in the morning, you leave the villa. The heat is rising, but your litter is ready carried by strong men. Shaded with woven canopies, its cushions stuffed with reeds and goose down. You pass through the streets quietly, avoiding the sun. Children scurry from the edges, bowing their heads. You do not make eye contact. It would be improper. In this world, visibility is power, and so is distance. The administrative building is near the temple complex. Its halls are orderly, cool, and echo slightly with the movement of sandals across polished stone. You enter through side passages, not the common entrances. Other officials nod. Politely, everyone knows their place. Review temple accounts, grain exports, tax ledgers. These numbers represent thousands of lives, but you think of them as measures of balance, columns of production and tribute. A nation shaped by math. You are educated, of course. As a child, you learn to read and write under the guidance of a private tutor. You know the proverbs of Tehotep, the hymns to Ra, the architecture of a perfectly aligned tomb. But education is not used to labor, it is used to lead. You delegate, preserve the structure. As the sun nears its peak, you return home. The servants prepare lunch-roasted duck, lentil stew, bread still warm from the oven. You recline on a couch as musicians softly pluck strings nearby. A dancer might perform if guests are present. If not, you enjoy silence, broken only by the cooing of doves from the garden. The garden itself is your pride. A square courtyard, symmetrically arranged with fig trees, lotus pools, and gravel pathways. A statue of Thoth sits at the center, half-shadowed by vines. Here you walk slowly in the afternoon, dictating letters or simply meditating. You are expected to be serene, to move with calm authority. Even your anger, when it appears, must be formal and measured. In the evening, you may attend a banquet, cushioned lounges, gold-gilded cups, musicians with delicate harps, perfume cones melt atop wigs, releasing sweetness into the room. Guests toast to life, to the gods, to the pharaoh. Conversation dances politely, full of layered meaning. Insults, when they occur, are subtle, wrapped in poetry. You never cook, you never dig, you never sweat in the fields or carry loads. But your life is not idle, it is ritualized. Your movements are watched. Your speech must be precise. A wrong word to the wrong person could mean exile or worse. And though your world is luxurious, it is fragile. One flood too low, one failed harvest, and the resentment of the people grows. You feel it in the stiffness of greetings, the slight delay before a bow. Your servants speak less openly. Your scribes correct each other more cautiously. Power, you realize, must be constantly performed. It cannot be assumed. Before you sleep, you are bathed again. Fragrant oils are rubbed into your skin. You lie beneath linen sheets, and the ceiling above is painted with stars. You do not know hunger. You do not fear the lash. But you do not truly rest either. You carry your role like a garment, never removed, never forgotten. Somewhere beyond the walls of your estate, a man hauls bricks beneath the same stars. He does not know your name. You do not know his. But the pyramid rises for both of you in different ways. And so, you drift into sleep, not freely, but in a silence so carefully arranged that even your dreams must bow. Segment 5. The Priest in the Tomb. Rituals of the Afterlife in the Valley of Kings. Imagine the air cool and still, the walls of the tomb passage narrowing around you, painted with ancient gods who watch you with solemn, eternal eyes. The flicker of flame from an oil lamp dances across depictions of Anubis, of Osiris, of the Book of the Dead. This is not a place of fear. It's not in the ancient Egyptian sense. Death here is not an end, but a beginning. And you, if you were a priest of the mortuary culture, the quiet steward of that journey, your days begin before sunrise, not in chaos or fatigue, but with deep preparation. Purification comes first. You bathe in sacred water, drawn from a blessed pool near the temple grounds. You speak no words. Is silence, in these early hours, is not emptiness, is respect. The linen robes you wear are fresh, white, tightly bound. A leopard skin sash may be worn across your shoulder if your rank permits it, but you anoint your skin with sacred oils, not for pleasure but as armor, spiritual and symbolic. You are not a temple priest presiding over sacrifices or chants to Ra at midday. You are a funerary priest, serving the dead. Specifically, you serve one soul, perhaps that of a noble, or even a royal, whose tomb lies deep in the western cliffs of the valley. That soul, though gone from the body, must be nourished, spoken to, honored each and every day. Well, these acts their spirit cannot live well in the afterlife. The Ka, the Ba, and the Akal components of the soul must be tended just like a garden. The tomb itself is your sanctuary. As you enter, you bow your head. The air here smells of old incense, of dry earth, and of the faint, persistent dust of limestone. The offerings are placed near the false door bread. Onions, beer, dried meats, sometimes fruits or flowers depending on the season. You speak the offering formula slowly, deliberately. For the Ka of the noble, may he be satisfied in the field of reeds. You repeat the name, always the name. The dead live through remembrance. Your voice is measured, not loud, but firm enough to carry into the stone. You do not shout. You do not cry. You speak as though the tomb were listening. And in a way, it is. On some days, special rituals are required, perhaps the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed at the time of burial, where you recite spells and use ritual tools to symbolically reawaken the senses of the deceased. You touch the lips of the mummy or the statue, allowing them to eat, to breathe, to speak in the next world. The act is ancient even in your time, and it is not taken lightly. Every movement is dictated by tradition, passed down through centuries. You may carry amulets, each carefully chosen and placed scarabs for transformation, ankhs for life, the jed for stability. These are not ornaments. They're spells made tangible, each one a compact with the gods. And then there are the scrolls. You may unroll the Book of the Dead if the deceased was wealthy enough to afford a personal copy and read from its passages. The journey through Duat, the underworld, is long and complex. The soul must face trials, serpents, fire, puzzles, the judgment hall. You read the words to prepare them, to empower them, to guide their steps even now. Afterward, you may repair the tomb's arrangements. Dust is wiped from offerings. New flowers are placed where old ones have withered. Sometimes a visiting family member leaves a letter, scratched in charcoal on the wall, prayers, requests, even complaints. You read these too, you do not judge. The dead do not ask for perfection-only memory. Once the rituals are complete, you exit the tomb walking backwards, never turning your back. Outside, the light is dazzling. You squint. Return your tools to the temple and bow once again before the threshold. Your work is not glamorous. You do not lead ceremonies seen by hundreds. You do not advise kings. But you carry out a duty no one else can. You keep the soul anchored, you tend the house of eternity. And when your own time comes, other hands will perform the rites for you. At night, you sit by a brazier, oil lamp in hand, reading scrolls or mending beads on a pectoral collar. You speak softly with your peers, perhaps sharing a dream you had of the deceased sometimes. It's said, they visit to offer thanks or reminders. You do not fear this. It is proof that your work endures. The stars rise over the valley. The cliffs glow faintly under moonlight, and the wind carries the scent of desert sage. Somewhere below, in the cool silence of stone, the soul you served sleeps peacefully, because of you. And though the world above may shift and change within that tomb, time stands still. And in that stillness, the past remains alive. Segment 6. The Builders of Deir el-Medina. A village for artists who painted eternity. Imagine waking to the soft, dry warmth of the desert sun, not in a palace. Not in a peasant's reed hut, but in a carefully constructed stone house, nestled in a secluded wadi, surrounded by neighbors who, like you, are artisans of the afterlife. You live in Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders. And while your name may not be carved on the lintel of a grand monument, your work will be seen for thousands of years. The village is small and walled, about 68 houses laid out in a neat grid along a single main road. It is isolated, tucked between the cliffs above the Valley of the Kings, far from the markets and temples of Thebes. Life here is ordered, intimate, and surprisingly literate. Most men can read and write. Many women, too. This is a place of skill, of craft, of quiet prestige. You are not merely a laborer. You are a tomb artist, a sculptor, a painter, or a draftsman, perhaps even a scribe. You and your fellow villagers are responsible for carving, decorating, and inscribing the tombs of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. And because of the secrecy and sanctity of your work, your community is both privileged and restricted. You are paid directly by the state in grain, oil, beer, and cloth. You live with a certain security, but your time is not your own. 6 days a week, you walk over the ridge to the Valley of the Kings. The journey is short, but steep. You leave early, before the heat swells, carrying tools and leather bags, chisels, pigments, brushes, made from rushes. You work within tombs that echo with centuries of devotion, your task. To shape the walls with stories the dead will carry with them forever. Inside the tomb, the air is cool and dry. You kneel beside scenes sketched in red ink guidelines that show you where gods will stand, where pharaohs will journey through the underworld, where spells from the Amduat or the litany of Ra must be inscribed. You may spend a week on a single figure's foot, a day just on the curve of a single eye. Each line is deliberate, each color symbolic. Blue for rebirth, yellow for divinity, red for strength, black for the fertile Nile soil, the essence of renewal. Work is quiet but not solemn. You chat softly with your colleagues, sometimes joke, sometimes argue. As a mistake is made, you scrape it away with care and start again. Nothing leaves the tomb imperfect, not if it can be helped. Lunch is eaten in the shade, outside bread, onions, beer thick enough to chew. You sit on sun-warmed stones and watch hawks circle above. Then back to work. Chisels tap. Dust rises. Paint dries slowly. And in the half-light of these narrow halls, time seems to blur. Once the sun begins to lower, you make your way back to the village. The evenings are peaceful. Families gather in courtyards. Children run between homes. Neighbors gossip over fires. Women grind grain or weave linen, while men mend tools or compose letters. Yes, letters. The people of Deir el-Medina were famously literate. We know their thoughts not only from official inscriptions, but from scraps of pottery and stone, astrakhan, which they doodled, complained, made lists, wrote prayers, even composed poetry. And not just about work. Some texts speak of love, of frustration, of dreams. One man wrote a letter to the underworld itself, demanding justice from a deceased neighbor who had wronged him. Another recorded the precise amount of beer consumed at a festival. These were not faceless artisans. They were individuals, complex, witty, thoughtful. People who lived among dust and gold. But even in this village of privilege, life was not without hardship. Tools broke, paint spoiled, tempers flared. Wages were sometimes delayed, and strikes recorded by scribes did occur. Workers would lay down their chisels, refusing to return until they were fed. The state responded, eventually. But it reminds us. Even those who built the gods' resting places still had to ask for bread. Your home is small, but well built. Stone walls, a roof of beams and reeds, rooms arranged around a central courtyard. A niche in the wall holds a small statue, perhaps of Ptah or Thoth. You sleep on a mat, covered in linen, listening to the hush of the desert wind. It is a quiet life, but not a lonely one. And when you die, your tomb, though modesties crafted with the same care you gave to the kings, painted scenes show you offering to Osiris, embracing your wife, fishing on the Nile's calm waters. You are surrounded by symbols of rebirth. Your name is written clearly because to name something is to let it live. Centuries later, your tomb may be uncovered, and someone might gaze upon your artwork and wonder what your life was like. Though your voice is long silenced, your brushstrokes will still whisper from the walls. In Deir el-Medina, you did not just build tombs, but you built memory. And memory, in ancient Egypt, was the closest thing to forever. Segment 7, Nile and Calendar, Time Flood. In the rhythm of the Egyptian year, close your eyes and imagine the distant murmur of water. Not a stream, not a pond, but a broad, endless flow, Nile slipping silently through fields, villages, and temples. It is not just a landscape feature. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was life, time, and prophecy, all braided together. Everything moved to its rhythm, not the tick of a clock, but the swell of a river that flooded and fell with perfect patience. You are a farmer now, or perhaps a village priest. Your home is made of sun-dried mud brick. Your family lives by the water's edge, close enough to feel the cool breath of the river at dawn, far enough to avoid the wrath of its flood. The year is not divided by 4 seasons, but 3. Akit, the time of inundation. Pare, the time of emergence and planting. Finshimu, the season of harvest. The rhythm of the Nile is the rhythm of everything. During Akit, the river swells, spills over its banks, covering the lowlands in a rich, dark silt that renews the soil each year. The fields disappear under shallow water, calm and shining. You cannot farm during this time. Instead, your days are spent mending tools, building boats, or if summoned, working on the state's great building projects. The pharaoh might call for conscripts to work on a temple, a canal, or a pyramid. You leave your fields behind, knowing they are safe beneath the Nile's gift. As the waters slowly recede, the Pare season begins. The land reappears, wet and heavy. You sow wheat, barley, flax. You walk barefoot behind a simple plow, often pulled by cattle. The soil is soft, fragrant with decay and life. Your hands press seeds into the ground. The air is cool. There is hope. In the evenings, you may consult the stars. The appearance of Sirius Sopdet, as you call her, marks the start of the flood, the turning of the year. You track her rising above the eastern horizon just before dawn, and in that star's gleam, you see the future of your crops. The Egyptian calendar is ancient, precise. 12 months, 30 days each, with 5 epigomenal days set aside for the birthdays of the gods. It is a calendar of ritual as much as of agriculture. The priests maintain the calendar, inscribing it in red and black on temple walls and papyrus scrolls. Every festival, every sacrifice, every procession is timed with celestial care. Even the architecture reflects it, temples aligned to solstices, statues positioned to greet the sun on a specific day. Time in Egypt is both sacred and cyclical. Nothing is lost. Everything returns. As the crops rise, Shemu begins. This is the time of reward, of sweat and scythe. You harvest what the river is given, stacking bundles of grain in neat rows, threshing it with care, measuring it into granaries watched over by scribes. Taxes are collected as even now. A share of your bounty is owed to the state, to the temple, to the landowners. You pay, because that is how balance is kept. When the granaries are full, and the river has shrunk again to its deep channel, you celebrate. Offerings are made to Hapi, the god of the flood. Dances are performed in small shrines. Children splash in the shallows. The land is whole again. You rest briefly until the cycle begins once more. The Nile does not rush. It does not rage. It gives slowly, with deep certainty. And in return, the people of Egypt order their lives around its patience. You mark the years not by numbers, but by floods, in the year of the high water, or the year the granary overflowed. Time itself is moist, dark and nourishing, like the soil of the floodplain. And so you live not in haste, but in rhythm. Your days rise like Sirius. Your work flows like the river. Your memories collect like silt. Even in death, the Nile guides you. Tombs face west, toward the setting sun, the land of the dead. But your spirit, your Ka, may sail the river forever north to the delta, south to the soars, carried gently on the current of eternity. The calendar turns. The stars rise again. And as you sit by the banks, watching the water rise with the summer heat, you feel no panic, only the peace of something eternal. Segment 8. Household gods and everyday magic. Superstition, spirit, and the quiet beliefs of ordinary Egyptians. In ancient Egypt, religion was not a matter of weekly worship or distant theology. It lived in every moment, woven into meals, whispered into darkness, carried in amulets worn beneath simple linen tunics. For most people, the temples of Karnak or Luxor were vast, mysterious places. You might see them on festival days, catch a glimpse of the priests or the sacred bark, of Amun being carried through the streets, but your daily prayers were offered at home. Your house is humble, but alive with devotion. Near the hearth sits a small shrine, just a carved niche in the wall, or a shelf adorned with figures molded from clay or wood. You light a bit of incense at dawn, wave the smoke gently toward the figurines, and murmur words passed down from your grandmother. Keep my children safe. Keep my bread warm. Keep the snakes away. These are not official hymns, they're the songs of survival. The gods who dwell in your home are not the same as those worshipped by the pharaoh. These are the protectors of family, birth, and boundary. Tauret, the hippo-headed goddess with pendulous belly and leonine claws, guards pregnant women. You keep her image near your sleeping mat when your wife is with child. Base, the dwarf with the lion's mane and wild expression, dances grotesquely to frighten evil spirits. His image is painted on bedposts, carved onto cosmetic spoons, even inked into skin as a tattoo. Magic, or Heka, is not superstition in your world. It is as real as bread or wind. A sick child is not merely unwell. Perhaps the breath of a demon has touched him, or an ancestor is displeased. A wise woman in the village may chant over a cup of water, stirring it with a reed from the riverbank, then offer it to the child to drink. And if he recovers, no one questions it. The healing came from both herb and word. Children wear protective amulets from infancy carved scarabs, little eyes of Horus, or simple knots tied in red thread. You whisper to them when storms come. Don't be afraid, base is watching. You sprinkle natron salt along thresholds. You hang reeds or images of cobras above the door to ward off scorpions and envy alike. Dreams are messages. If you wake with the memory of a crocodile chasing you, you might consult a dream book, perhaps borrowed from a neighbor who can read. These books list common dreams and their meanings. To dream of drowning is good. It means protection. To dream of bread crumbling is bad. It means loss. But even without a book, you know what dreams feel wrong? You sleep with an amulet under your pillow on troubled nights. The boundaries between the living and the dead are not sealed. You write letters to your ancestors on potsherds and leave them at the family tomb. Ask them to intercede when illness comes, or when the harvest looks poor. Mother, do not forget me. Help me with my husband's heart. He does not listen. Send me peace, and not all spirits are kind. Some whisper through cracks in the wall or bring cold shivers to a room. You know the signs. Food spoiling too quickly, candles flickering oddly, dreams too heavy to remember. For these, you consult a spell perhaps copied from a temple scribe or carried down orally. You draw protective figures on papyrus and place it under the threshold. You chant the names of the 4 sons of Horus. You rinse the house with water from the river, mixed with a pinch of desert sand. Even objects carry memory. A walking stick, once held by your grandfather, a comb carved by your mother. These are more than tools. They hold presence, and you treat them with quiet reverence. To discard them carelessly would be unthinkable. Festivals are communal acts of both worship and joy. On certain days, statues of the gods are brought out of the temples and paraded through the streets. You and your family watch from a respectful distance, hands raised. If the god's bark nods as it passes, it is a sign. You weep or cheer softly or bow. And at the end of the day, when you sit in the courtyard and the wind cools your skin, you look up at the stars, not with scientific detachment, but with awe. They are not burning suns. They are the souls of the dead, shining in the field of reeds. One day you hope you will join them not as a distant memory, but as a glowing spark, visible to your descendants when they look up and whisper your name. The great gods reign from gilded temples, but in the shadowed corners of ordinary homes, the real heart of Egypt beats quiet, superstitious, and eternal. Segment 9. The market, the workshop, and the beer house. Economy and labor in the land of the Pharaohs imagine. The heat of morning lifting slowly off packed earth as you make your way toward the market. It is not a grand bazaar, not a bustling port, just a broad open space between houses or along the riverbank, shaded here and there by palm frond awnings. But this is where things happen, where things move, where your hands and your voice are your currency. There is no coin, not in your world. Currency as you might understand it, coins made of metal will not appear in Egypt until far, far later. Instead, value is measured in what things are worth in grain, in oil, in linen, in beer. You come to market with a few baskets of onions, perhaps a clay jar of honey or sandals your husband made. You seek thread or salt or a little roasted fish. Barter is delicate. There is no fixed price. Instead, haggling is a quiet dance of words and glances. This honey is thick, it came from lotus flowers, you say. Ah, but this thread is fine linen from the priest's loom, replies the weaver. Agreements are sealed not with signatures, but with nods, gestures, and the memory of fairness. Reputations matter. So does generosity. The market is noisy, but not chaotic. Children chase each other between stalls. A woman calls out her wares: dried figs, fresh bread, reeds for weaving. Nearby, a scribe sits with a reed pen, and scraps of pottery, a stroker recording transactions for those who cannot write. He takes a pinch of your barley in exchange for his ink. Everyone gets something they need. Most leave with a bit less than they hoped, and a bit more than they expected. Behind the market lies the heartbeat of labor, the workshops. Here, the air smells of wood shavings, of melting beeswax, of copper being hammered into shape. The carpenter works with simple tools: a bronze adze, a wooden mallet. He carves not only tables and chairs, but statues of gods, funeral beds, coffins. His apprentice sweeps the floor with a palm broom and learns to read the grain of the wood like another might read the stars. Next door, a weaver draws linen thread through a vertical loom. The rhythm of the shuttle is soft and steady like a breath. She sings to herself perhaps an old lullaby or a hymn to Hathor, goddess of beauty and love. Linen is the fabric of your world. Everyone wears it, from the poorest farmer to the pharaoh himself, but the quality varies greatly. A temple priest's robe is fine as spider silk. Yours is rough, but serviceable. It'll do. Down another alley, the metalworker tends a small fire. He pours molten copper into a clay mold, shaping it into tools or amulets. His arms are strong from bellows and hammer. The work is dangerous, metal burns, fumes rise, but he is respected. Tools, after all, build everything else. There are potters, too, spinning their wheels with their feet, shaping wet clay into jars for water, beer, or grain. They fire them in open kilns, the smoke curling like incense. The designs are simple, often unpainted, but each pot is unique. Each bears the shape of its maker's hands. And then, just beyond the workshops, is the beer house. Gathering place, a rest stop, a social web. Beer in Egypt is not a luxury, it is food. Made from barley and often thick, unfiltered, it is drunk by rich and poor alike. You might trade a day's labor for a few jugs of it, sweetened with dates, or spiced with herbs. The beer house is run by a woman, usually a chepinette. She knows everyone. She knows who owes what, who fights too much, who sings best after the third jug. Conversations here drift from idle gossip to small deals. A farmer needs help threshing. A mason offers to repair a wall. Girl jokes that she saw a ghost by the riverbank. Someone claims to have seen a crocodile in the canal. Laughter follows. Someone sings an old song about a lost cat. Someone else weeps softly in the corner to many funerals this season. And as the sun begins to lower, the market stalls are folded, the looms are covered, the fire's allowed to die down. You walk home slowly, your arms full of what you managed to barter. Your sandals are dusty, your back aches, but your house has bread, and the children laugh. And tonight, you are lucky there will be music. This is not a history of kings or temples, but it is history. The kind made in footsteps and handprints, in calloused fingers and weary smiles. The kind that vanishes without song or statue, yet carries the weight of a world. Segment 10. Festival days. Joy. Processions. In the sacred public life of the Egyptian people, the sky is still pale with mourning. But already the village stirs with an unfamiliar excitement. Today is no ordinary day. It is Hebnefer, a beautiful feast day, a festival sacred to Hathor, or Osiris, or perhaps to Ammon himself. You've marked it on your simple calendar, not with ink, but in your mind, in the way your mother once did, and her mother before her. Festival days are rare, precious, and brimming with ritual. But they are also celebrations of life itself. You rise early and bathe not in haste, but with care. Water drawn from the river, splashed over your skin, chased with a dab of oil infused with lotus or myrrh. You wear your cleanest linen tunic, slightly frayed at the hem but washed bright by the sun. A simple necklace, perhaps faience beads or a clay amulet rests cool on your collarbone. Today you wish to be seen by the gods, even if only for a moment. The air smells of baking bread and crushed herbs. Incense begins to rise from small altars at each doorstep. Offerings are prepared loaves, dried figs, a splash of beer poured into a bowl for the spirits. Children chatter, elders smile. Musicians tune their instruments' wooden clappers, sistra, small harps whose notes seem to shimmer in the morning haze. If you live near a larger town, you may journey toward the temple precinct, where the main procession begins. Crowds gather quietly at first, the hum of anticipation low and warm. Then the gates open, and from within the temple's sanctum, the priests emerge slowly, ceremonially bearing the sacred bark, a gilded shrine carrying the statue of the god. You cannot see the statue itself. It is veiled, hidden from profane eyes. But you see the way the priests walk, measured, deliberate, as though their feet float rather than touch the earth. You hear the chant, the rhythmic rise and fall of sacred language. You feel the air change, charged not with fear but with awe. The god is with you now, not in symbol, but in presence. People reach out not to touch, but to be near. Some cry, some sing. Women ululate softly. Offerings are lifted, how garlands of flowers, jars of unguents, small figurines carved over weeks in anticipation of this day. The bark is carried through the streets, perhaps to another temple, or a sacred lake, or across the river by boat. Each movement is laden with meaning, but this is not a solemn march. It is joyful. Sacred joy, yes, but still joy. The festival unfolds with music, dance, and storytelling. At one corner, a man paints children's faces like falcons. At another, acrobats perform simple tricks. Bread is shared, beer is passed. A storyteller recites the tale of Set and Horus with dramatic flair, eliciting laughter even in its grim moments. And for those who cannot attend the grand ceremonies, those far in the countryside, the gods are not absent. They are honored at small altars, in simple gestures. A field cleared for dancing, a song sung at dusk, a child crowned with papyrus reeds. The presence of the divine is felt in all these things. Festival is not bound by walls or priests. It breathes through the people. Some festivals last a single day. Others span several. The beautiful festival of the valley is one such. When the statue of Amun sails across the Nile from Karnak to visit the tombs on the western bank, reuniting with the dead. Families make picnics in the necropolis, feasting among the ancestors, speaking their names aloud, telling stories, renewing the bonds of memory. There is no fear of the dead here, only kinship. By evening, the streets glow with lamps. Music still plays softer now, like a lullaby drifting over rooftops. Children sleep curled beside worn sandals. Priests return the god to the temple, their hands steady, even as their robes are damp with sweat. You return home, the smell of incense still clinging to your tunic. Your ears ring faintly from song. Your heart is heavy with something you cannot name, a joy too deep for language. You light a small lamp. You sit quietly, and you think. Today the divine walked the earth, and you were there. In a world where time is measured by flood and harvest, these festival days shine like jewels, brief, bright, unforgettable. They are the heartbeats of the year, and in their rhythm you find your own. Segment 11, Death and Burial. What ordinary Egyptians believed about the afterlife. Imagine that your days have grown quieter. Your hands, once busy with looms or fields, now rest more often. You sit longer in the shade, watching your grandchildren chase each other in the dust, their laughter like birdsong. You think more often of those who have gone before your mother, whose name you still speak softly at dawn, your sister, whose bracelet you keep wrapped in cloth. You know your own time will come. In Egypt, it is not morbid to think of death. It is practical, it is respectful, it is necessary. Preparations for the afterlife begin early, not out of fear, but as part of living well. If you are fortunate, you save for your tomb nothing grand, perhaps just a simple shaft carved into rock or a chamber in the village necropolis. You gather items to be buried with you, a small jar of beer, a few loaves of bread, a figure of a servant to help in the afterlife, a comb, a worn amulet shaped like the ankh. These things are not tokens, they are tools. You will need them. At your death, your family prepares your body. Not all can afford full mummification. That is reserved for the wealthy, but there are simpler rites. The body is cleansed with water from the Nile. Perfumed oil is rubbed into the skin. Amulets are placed over the heart, the eyes, the soles of the feet. Simple shroud wraps you. Words are whispered old. Words, protective words, meant to guide and shield. The journey begins not with a departure, but with a procession. Family and neighbors carry your body, sometimes in a wooden coffin, sometimes on a simple bier. They walk slowly, chanting, wailing softly. If you were loved, your name is spoken again and again. May he find favor in the west. May she be welcomed by Osiris. A necropolis lies beyond the fields, near the desert's edge. West, always, west the direction of the setting sun, the gate to the next world. You are laid to rest facing east, toward the rising sun, symbol of rebirth. Your tomb, whether a shaft or a chamber, is sealed with care. Inside, the items you brought in life wait for you. Perhaps a few lines of the Book of the Dead are inscribed or placed on papyrus spells to navigate the duat, the underworld. But if not, your memory still lives in those you leave behind. And in Egypt, memory is everything. The afterlife is not a vague, disembodied heaven. It is vivid, it is tactile. It is, in many ways, a perfected version of your earthly village. You must journey first through darkness, the land of rivers, serpents, and gates. You must name the guardians, recall the secret words. Your heart will be weighed against the feather of Mat, the principle of truth. If your heart is heavy with wrongdoing, it will be devoured by Amit, the devourer. But if it is light, you will pass into the field of reeds. There you farm without hardship. You eat bread that never grows stale. You drink water that never dries. The sun shines but never burns. The fields are green and endless. Your family is there. Your ancestors smile. You reunite not as shadows, but as whole and real. You walk among them, a presence, not a memory. But for all this to be true, your name must live. The greatest fear in Egypt is not death. It is being forgotten. This is why your children speak your name at festivals, why they place offerings on your tomb dates, onions, a cup of beer, sometimes only a stone with your name scratched into it. It is why even the poor try to leave behind something, an inscription, a pot, a scarab, anything that might whisper across centuries. I was here. For many, even a modest burial is enough. The gods do not measure wealth, only balance. Did you lie, steal, betray? Or did you honor the gods, feed the hungry, care for your kin? These are the questions written in your bones. Even now, across the millennia, you may still be remembered. A pottery shard bearing your name, unearthed by wind and time, carried to a museum or temple archive. A thread of linen sealed in the dry silence of the desert, still bearing the scent of resin and myrrh. In that, your kata vital essence remains, quiet, waiting, at peace. In Egypt, death is not silence. It is a long, slow hymn, sung by generations, sung by water and wind. And in that song you live forever. Segment 12. Women of the Nile. Family work and the roles of women in ancient Egypt. Imagine a courtyard in the early light, dappled with the shadows of fig trees and palm fronds. A woman kneels by a stone basin, grinding grain with practiced rhythm. Her sleeves are rolled, her fingers dusted with flour, her eyes watching her youngest child toddle in the dust. This is a common morning for a woman in ancient Egypt, and yet within its simplicity lies a quiet authority. She is not merely a servant to the home. She is its center, its planner, its keeper of memory. In ancient Egypt, women were granted more legal rights than in many other ancient societies. A woman could own property, manage her own inheritance, enter into contracts, and initiate divorce. These rights were not always exercised equally. Of course, wealth and class made a difference, but the legal framework recognized women as individuals capable of action. A woman could bring a case to court. She could appear in legal documents by her own name. Her voice mattered. Marriage, while socially expected, was not sacred in the religious sense. It was a partnership often arranged, sometimes chosen. When a couple married, there was no formal ceremony required. The act of a man taking a woman into his home was declaration enough. Some wealthier families drafted marriage contracts, detailing responsibilities, property arrangements, and what would happen in case of divorce. A woman kept what she brought into the marriage land, livestock, jewelry, and might even retain control of it during the union. In the home, a woman's role was central. She oversaw food preparation, textile production, children, and the household economy. Linen weaving, in particular, was often a woman's task. From planting the flax to spinning the thread and working the loom, the process was long and rhythmic. Linen was not only clothing, it was currency, offering shroud. And in every fine thread, there were countless hours of labor, often silent and outside the home. Women could be found in markets, selling goods, bartering for household needs, or managing small businesses. Some women ran inns or beer houses, important centers of social and economic life. Others served as musicians, dancers, or mourners during rituals. In temple precincts, elite women might serve as priestesses or chantresses, playing sacred music, tending to the divine statues, or participating in processions. One such title, God's Wife of Ammon, carried both spiritual prestige and real political influence, especially during the New Kingdom. Women also played key roles in birth and healing. Midwives, though their names rarely survive, were deeply respected. Fertility was sacred. To give birth was to take part in divine creation. Women painted images of Toret and Base on their walls, wore amulets shaped like the goddess Meskenet, and whispered invocations during labor. Herbs, spells, and oils were used to ease pain. After birth, the umbilical cord might be buried near the threshold, binding the child to the home, the land, and the ancestors. Education for girls was rare, but not unheard of. Daughters of scribes or priests might learn to read, especially if they were to enter temple service. Some left behind writings, songs, or letters. Most, however, learned through observation and repetition. The knowledge of how to run a household, interpret dreams, prepare medicines, or honor the spirits was passed mother to daughter, quietly, generation by generation. Despite their contributions, most women remain nameless to history. Their lives were not etched in stone, but lived in the ephemeral bread baked and eaten, linen spun and worn, children born and buried. Yet in tomb paintings and fragments of letters, glimpses of their personalities emerge. A letter might chide a husband for neglect. A tomb relief might show a woman playing music or embracing her children. There is dignity in these small acts, a richness that formal records often overlook. In death, women were buried with the same care and ceremony as men, if their family could afford it. Their tombs often depicted scenes of domestic harmony, offering tables, music, perfume, flowers. The journey to the afterlife was open to them. Their hearts were weighed, their names spoken, their images painted with kohl-lined eyes and soft smiles, stepping into eternity alongside their loved ones. In the quiet balance of the Nile, women were not silent. They sang lullabies and hymns and funeral songs. They carried water jars and burdens, hopes and histories. They endured, created, and comforted. And while their statues may be fewer, their presence shaped the lives of every person who ever knelt in the fields or stood in a temple courtyard. To walk beside a woman of ancient Egypt is not to follow behind. It is to move with her rhythm, to feel the weight of the basket she carries, to smell the bread rising in her hearth, to hear the wisdom folded into her words. She is there, always unwritten, but not forgotten. Segment 13. Village life in the shadow of the Pharaoh. Community, class, and the quiet structure of society. Imagine a village at first light. The air is cool, the sky still streaked with stars. Birds flutter low over thatched roofs. Atched! The day begins not with alarm or urgency, but with steady motion. Wooden doors creak open. Smoke rises from small hearths. And the hum of voices low, familiar, fills the narrow streets. This is not a city or a grand capital. It is not home to scribes or overseers. But here, in this village shaped by sun-dried brick and ancestral memory, life pulses with a kind of quiet strength. Houses cluster close together, often sharing walls and shaded spaces. Built from mud and straw, their walls crack and are patched again with fresh plaster. Floors are swept with bundled reeds. Roofs are flat, used for sleeping in the summer heat or storing bundles of herbs. Inside, a simple altar may hold offerings to household gods Bes, protector of the home. Toret, guardian of childbirth. These are not grand idols, but small personal comforts. The people here are not powerful in the way that pharaohs are, but they are not powerless. Their lives are rooted in land, in trade, in the bonds between neighbors. The man who tills the field shares tools with the potter. The woman who weaves linen trades it for honey. Every task is part of a larger cycle, each gesture part of an unwritten pact to keep the village whole. Class exists, though it is rarely marked by obvious signs. Some homes are larger. Some families hire laborers during harvest. Village elder or foreman may act as a liaison with higher authorities, collecting taxes, resolving disputes. But hierarchies are subtle. Respect is earned over years through fairness, generosity, and the ability to remember things others forget. Who lost a goat last flood season? Buried a child the year the Nile failed to rise. Children play freely, barefoot, darting between doorways. They are taught not with books, but through watching how to plant seed, shape clay, offer prayer. Education comes in gestures. In the rhythm of repeated days, elders sit in shaded corners telling stories with slow, careful words, myths of the gods, tales of lost travelers, lessons folded into metaphor. Memory is their wealth. There is no single ruler here. The pharaoh is distant a name inscribed on tax rolls, a face carved into stone. His presence is felt through grain quotas, through conscription, when labor is needed for a canal or a royal tomb. Once or twice a year, an official may arrive from a larger town, bearing orders or collecting reports. He is treated with deference, but also with weariness. He does not stay long. Religion, though central, is also intimate. While the great gods dwell in temples, every household has its own rituals. Water poured each morning for the dead, incense burned at dusk, amulets tucked into bedding. These small acts form an invisible thread between the world of the living and the unseen. On festival days, the village might gather to process toward the river, singing hymns written centuries earlier. Children carry garlands. The oldest among them recite prayers almost forgotten by the cities. The village also has its tensions. Disputes over property, jealousy over harvest yields, accusations of theft. These are resolved often by the elders, sometimes by priests. Occasionally, a scribe records the matter on papyrus, with formal language and long, winding sentences. But more often, issues are settled through quiet conversation. "You remember when your cousin borrowed my donkey?" someone might say. And from there, a solution unfolds. Seasons govern everything. The flood season brings stillness fields underwater, families repairing tools, stories shared in dim rooms. As planting follows, then months of careful tending, and finally, the great rush of harvest. Life is not easy, but it is predictable. Famine comes, sometimes, disease, always. Yet in every family there is someone who remembers how to prepare poultices, how to speak calming words, how to navigate loss without letting it shatter the daily rhythm. The village is not romantic. It smells of sweat and cooking fires, of livestock and earth. It is marked by routine, not grandeur. But there is beauty in its constancy. In how one family helps another rebuild a collapsed wall, in how names of the dead are spoken before meals, how children carry baskets of bread to neighbors without being told. To live in a village beneath the gaze of the pharaoh is to live in the spaces between stone monuments and royal decrees. To tend what is fragile, to share what is scarce. To create a life not meant to be remembered in scrolls, carried forward in the tilt of a roof beam, in the curve of a handmade jar, in the echo of a song heard before sleep. This, too, is Egypt, not the Egypt of temples and crowns, but of morning bread, shared wells, and voices that rise together in prayer when the Nile returns, and with it, the promise of another year. Segment 14. Dreams, Omens, and Magic. How ancient Egyptians understood the unseen in the stillness of a hot night. Beneath a sky powdered with stars, you lie in a narrow room on a reed mat, the sounds of the village fading into silence. Sleep is not just rested as a crossing. When your eyes close, your soul travels. It wanders past the edge of the house over the river, through gates seen only by the dead and the gods. In your dream, you are visited by a falcon that speaks your name. You wake heart quickened. This is not nonsense. This is a message. In ancient Egypt, dreams were taken seriously. They were believed to be channels through which the divine could speak. A dream might warn of illness, hint at betrayal, or offer comfort from the dead. Professional dream interpreters existed, often scribes or priests trained in reading these nighttime visions. They kept dream books, collections of meanings written in careful hieroglyphs. If you dreamt of eating fish, it might mean prosperity. If you saw yourself drowning, danger could be near. But meaning always depended on context, on feeling, on timing. Magic called Heka was not trickery or illusion. It was a fundamental force, a divine energy given by the gods to humans so they could shape reality. It flowed through words, symbols, rituals, and the correct alignment of things. A well-crafted incantation was not a plight, it was an act. When a healer spoke charms over a poultice, he was not just soothing a wound, but commanding the sickness to leave. When a woman tied an amulet of Isis around her belly during pregnancy, she was invoking the protective magic of motherhood itself. Even scribes used magic. The very act of writing was sacred. Ink on papyrus was more than recorded, was invocation. A name written carried power. A curse written could bind. Spells against scorpions or snakes were copied into tiny scrolls, rolled and worn in miniature containers. Houses had protective figures at their thresholds best, with his dwarf-like grin, driving away evil. Lions placed in pairs to guard against nightmares. Omens came not just from dreams, but from daily life. The flight of birds, the direction of wind, a broken pot, hiccup at the wrong moment. These were not just events, but signs. Priests trained in Heka might be consulted to read these portents, and rituals were used to cleanse or divert negative fates. Offerings were made, incense burned, and symbolic actions performed like pouring water to wash away a predicted danger. For the illiterate and the elite alike, amulets were common. Scarabs for transformation. Eyes of Horus for protection. Knots of Isis for fertility. Some were mass-produced, others lovingly shaped, inscribed with the wearer's name and a spell. Jewelry was not just adornment, it was armor silent, glittering, powerful. Temples, too, were sites of immense magical practice. Priests did more than worship, they maintained balance between order and chaos. Daily rituals in temples, washing the god's statue, offering food, reciting hymns, were magical acts, ensuring the sun would rise. The Nile would flood and enemies would be held at bay. The temple walls themselves were enchanted, inscriptions of spells and sacred names etched deep, so their power would last even as the paint faded. Children learned early about the invisible world. A mother might draw a protective circle of charcoal around her sleeping baby. A father might whisper a prayer to Canaan before shaping clay, calling upon the god who formed humans on his potter's wheel. These were not grand gestures, but daily affirmations that the seen and unseen were bound together. Even the Pharaoh, divine as he was, relied on magic. He carried scepters, inscribed with symbols. He ordered temples built to specific alignments, ensuring harmony with celestial forces. His crown bore the Urius the rearing Cobrian embodiment of divine protection. And when enemies threatened, it was not only soldiers who were sent, but magicians, casting spells to confuse or weaken foes. Death, too, was steeped in Heka. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells for navigating the afterlife, was not poetry, it was a magical guide. Recited properly, its words could open doors, silence demons, and convince Osiris of one's worth. Every item buried with the deceased had purpose. Shabda small figurines would rise to serve in the afterlife. A painted eye on the coffin's side allowed the dead to see. Even the alignment of the tomb's entrance could affect the soul's journey. Yet magic was not without limits. There were dark practitioners, those who used Heka to harm. They were feared and punished. Spells could be broken, charms unraveled. The balance of magic required responsibility. That's why names were so guarded. Why even the gods had secret names, hidden from all but a few. To know a name fully was to hold power over its bearer. In your quiet home, you keep these truths close. You sweep your threshold each morning. You hang charms in the corners. You whisper the names of protective gods when your children sleep. You do not boast of these acts, but you do not forget them. For in Egypt, to live well is not just to plant and build, it is to walk with one foot in this world and one in the next. To listen, always, for what cannot be seen, but still surrounds you. Segment 15. The Enduring Echo. How the lives of ordinary Egyptians still speak across millennia. Picture a dry wind brushing over a crumbled wall of sun-baked brick. Beyond it, shards of pottery lay scattered, its once held in calloused hands, each holding water, beer, lentils, or honey. Now, they lie half-buried in silence, whispering of daily routines long past. Yet archaeologists, kneeling under the same sun, retrieve them with reverence, brushing away the sand as though waking the stories trapped inside. It is easy to think of history as the tale of the powerful, the names chiseled deep into granite, the gods towering in sanctuaries, the pharaoh's face gilded and ageless. But as the centuries pass, it is often the humble that speak most clearly. The accounts kept by village scribes, the doodles left on estraka, the lists of grain rations, the fingerprints left in a brick. These are not grand narratives, they're threads of life. At Deir el-Medina, the village of the royal tomb builders, names of laborers, artisans, and their families remain preserved. We know what they argued about, what they borrowed, what they feared in their dreams. One man complained of a stolen cloak, another wrote a love poem. A woman named Isis, daughter of Nacht, left behind a prayer for protection, and none of them ruled, but all of them lived with intention. We find letters written in clumsy hieratic script, addressed to loved ones or to the dead, left in tombs, like offerings. "I miss you," one fragment reads. "Why do you not visit me in my dreams?" In these lines, the barrier of time softens. Their sorrow is not ancient, it is simply human. We find toys buried with children, woven sandals too small for adult feet, dolls stuffed with papyrus. These items were not meant for eternity, yet they remained, not symbols, but remnants of real affection. In those quiet objects, grief is visible. So too is love. We find temples with graffiti etched into their walls, not defacement, but pilgrim marks. Names scrawled by visitors who hoped to be remembered by the gods. Some came from faraway towns. Others were villagers, leaving behind the only record of their passing. I stood here. One line seems to say, I was. Even in the grand tombs of nobles, it is the scenes of harvest, baking, fishing, and dancing that persist. Not battles, not laws, but gestures, bending, stirring, carrying. The work of human hands. These scenes were not decorative. They were instructional, eternal. A way to say, this is who we were, and perhaps this is what we will be again. The desert preserved much. Papyrus scrolls, hidden in jars. Beads tucked into folds of linen. Recipes, spells, records of wheat owed and paid. These fragments outlived the names of generals, outlasted bronze weapons and crumbled palaces. They remained not because they were powerful, but because they were constant. The rhythm of life, repeated and repeated until it carved its own monument in time. Today, when we study ancient Egypt, we do not only study its gods and rulers, we study the way a house was organized, the placement of cooking pots, the marks on the doorframe to count a child's height. We study songs sung to lull babies, the texture of linen, the wear on a handle. These are not trivial things. They are everything. To be ordinary in ancient Egypt was not to be forgotten. It was to be part of something vast, eternal, cyclical. The sun rose and you prayed. The river swelled and you planted. You lived not for glory, but for harmony. For Methatha balance between all things. You knew your place within that pattern. And in that quiet knowing, there was dignity. As we return now from this journey, back across centuries, across wind-blown dunes and silent tombs, let us carry with us not only the facts of history, but the feeling of it. The scent of fresh bread from a clay oven, the rustle of linen in a crowded market, the hush of a prayer spoken over a sleeping child. These are not loud things, but they are the things that last. The people of ancient Egypt are gone. Their homes crumbled, their names faded from stone, and yet they remain. In the lines of their writing, in the curve of a pot, in the dreams we still carry when we close our eyes and imagine the past, not as a lesson, but as a place, a living, breathing place. Thank you for traveling through that place. May its echoes follow you gently, like the lapping of the Nile against the reeds, soft, persistent, and full of life.